Hello, welcome everybody to the closing already panel at Nextv Series Caribbean 2022. Even in this context of explosive growth of new video content offerings, on-demand platforms, personal devices and applications, over-the-air television remains a stronghold. While audience ratings generally remain high, the digital area of free-to-air broadcast operations is really becoming increasingly critical to communicate with younger generations and really to expand business opportunities. We have brought together for this panel two executives who are heading the broadcast operations of two leading free-to-air stations in Jamaica and Barbados. They will help us really understand how the business is changing, what new opportunities they see on the horizon, and also what challenges they face moving forward. So let's introduce them. Claire Grant is the General Manager of Broadcast Services at RJR Gleaner Communications Group. She's based out of Jamaica. And Jewel Ford is the Head of TV Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, CBC Barbados, the country's public free-to-air TV and radio broadcaster. We also had Odette Bess Campbell scheduled to join us today. Odette is the Managing Director of the third Caribbean broadcaster, Grenada Broadcasting Network, GBN. Unfortunately, she is feeling a bit unwell today, so of course we will excuse her and from here wish her that she gets better very soon. So Claire, Jewel, welcome both of you. Let's start by introducing each of the two national television stations that you're managing. Tell us, how long have Television Jamaica and CBC Barbados been on air? What type of programming does each station broadcast? Do you produce all content yourselves, or do you also acquire content from external sources? And also, how does the station generate revenue? A lot of questions, but basic questions really to help us understand what the broadcasters are doing and what they're all about. Claire, do you want to start?
Okay, yes. Thanks very much for inviting us. It's always interesting to have conversations about the industry with other players. The Television Jamaica was originally a government-owned station and was acquired by what was then the RJR Communications Group in 1997. So television broadcasting started in Jamaica in the 1960s. It was government-owned, government-run. It had gotten to a point where it was not as viable as they would have wanted as a state station. And the decision was made to divest it. And RJR Communications Group, which at the time was only radio, looked at that as the next frontier for them as a company, and they acquired what was JBC, Jamaica Broadcasting Corporation, and it was rebranded and renamed into Television Jamaica, 1997.
Okay.
I mean, you asked a little bit about content. So from early in the game, the decision was understanding our market. It was about building local content, building content as far as is possible that is relevant to our market. It became even more of a approach to the business when cable entities became more pervasive in the market, and Jamaica is really kind of like a Wild West scenario. you have major cable operators in the formal sector, but back in the day you had people popping up, throwing up satellite dishes all over the place, and you had competition coming in that form. So it was early understood that it was going to be about what was relevant. Yes, you can buy content, but you also know that if you have something that is relevant to the audience, that you're going to be ahead of the game. So a fair amount of investment has been done on content that Jamaicans feel they'd like to see themselves on TV. So we do things to encourage content that allows the audience to see themselves.
Okay. And in terms of the revenue generation for the station, is all
Right.
advertising?
So it's all advertising. We're a free-to-air station. So in its model, there isn't any subscription base. I mean, in over the years, we have launched an OTT platform, and we have other ways of looking at the business. As the space is changing, it's getting very dynamic. But our primary revenue stream now is from advertising from over the air.
Okay. Thanks for that. And Jewel?
Well, thank you, Claire, for that. CBC started in 1963 as a radio station, and then a year later, they opened the television arm, free to air. We're still the only free to air television station on the island, but obviously people have different ways and methods of seeing content. They're either using streaming platforms, or they're watching YouTube or Facebook Live or whatever. So people are seeing content different places. Our content is, I'd say, at least 90% local. I think the only thing that isn't local for us are our movies that we show late in the evening, and we do carry some current affairs programming out of the United States. So we carry 60 Minutes and 48 Hours, because those kind of true crime programming is quite popular here. The content we produce, our in-house production department, television production department, has been restructured significantly. So I've been working with independent producers in the industry across the island to get content. I have a lot of young producers who've created some stuff. They have it on YouTube, but they want that national audience. And so I've been able to negotiate with them to get the content and show it on Channel 8. And that has been paying off for us in terms of people saying how much interesting content they're seeing. And normally, most people will tell you that once the news is finished at 8 o'clock, they switch to something else. More and more people are saying to me, well, I'm now watching CBC after the news because the programming is so interesting. So that formula has really worked for us.
Okay, very interesting. And Jewel, it has to be said that it's been an eventful past 12 months for Barbados, starting really with the eruption of the volcano in St. Vincent and the ensuing ash crisis that generated. But then you had the country's formal independent process from the UK, which culminated with a royal visit in November, shortly followed by national elections. And then last month, you hosted the West Indies versus England cricket series. So really, as I was saying, a very eventful past 12 months. I'm wondering, what role did national broadcasters such as CBC play during these events?
Since this administration has come into power in May 2018, their model has been a little different. Normally, CBC would set up and produce and broadcast the event. They've been using some independent producers. So we've been taking the feed and layering it with commentary. So what they're giving us is a clean video and audio feed, and then we layer commentary over it. With the ashfall, we did a live 2-hour program every day for 2 weeks, just to keep people abreast of what was happening in St. Vincent, where the volcano erupted, and then the whole cleanup effort here on the ground for people who had specific issues that needed to be addressed, where they could get that information. We did that. The formal independence process was pretty much the same. They had their own service provider, and we took the feed from them and layered it with our own commentary team, which included a specialist from the Barbados Defense Force, because the move to a republic is very much a state occasion. And then we have Prince Charles was down here visiting, so it was very much a lot of pomp and pageantry with the Defense Force and the and march buys and stuff. So we had an analyst from that, and then we also had a constitutional lawyer who could speak to the different elements of the move to a republic, and that went over very, very well with the audience. Then we had national elections, and a short campaign. We had 3 weeks. So we were doing a political program called X-Trail, which I produced and presented. And then on the night, we did a full broadcast as we logged in the votes as they came in, and then announced that once again the administration won all 30 seats. Cricket was different simply because we didn't have the rights to the cricket. I believe it was owned by ESPN, so it wasn't even offered to us to carry. So what we got was a package of highlights at the end of every day that was used in the news stories of the night. But we weren't involved in it in terms of carrying having access, licensing the rights or anything. We just were not involved in that.
Yeah, and I'll get back on specifically that content rights issue later on in the discussion. So thanks for that, Claire. In the case of our JR Gleaner, the group made a strategic decision, and you briefly touched on that, to launch its own OTT platform. It's called One Spot Media, and that was back in 2014, which has to be said, it was a very pioneering development for the Caribbean region at the time. Why did you decide to do it, and what content does the service offer? Was it designed for domestic or international audiences, and also what is the business model behind it? I guess from your previous answers, you will tell me it's also based on advertising, right? Yeah.
I would say consistent with how the group has always positioned itself, in that it's trying to be ahead of the curve in terms of how the space is evolving. So in much the same way that it got to a position of saying we're in communications, we're in media, we need to have a television station in the group. That we had at that time already expanded to have 3 cable stations alongside our free-to-air stations. So we had kind of niche positions, one on sports, one on entertainment, and one that was a straight news format. Watching the developments in the technology, we began to pay attention to say, look, audience behavior is going to change. And if audience behavior is going to change, we need to be moving along the change. We don't want to have to catch up to the change. It's not very often that we will do that kind of investment, because obviously we're small and it's something that you have to consider, is it a good business decision? However, when it comes to something like this, it was important that we would be ahead of the curve and not be behind with other larger dominant players coming to us with this service and saying, come with us, as opposed to us saying, well, we already have it, so, do you want to buy it from us? So it was a kind of a visionary thing. It also meant that we had to go about it a little differently in terms of making sure that it had a structure that gave us ownership, but at the same time developing with a partner that would allow us to grow it at a certain pace. It also meant that we were going to be on the teething pains of this technology, because in 2014, OTT was in its embryonic stages. So there was a lot that was not known about how to get a good stream out and all of that. But it was primarily understanding that the space was changing, audience behavior was changing, and most importantly, holding on to the understanding that television is not the television set. Right? And so from early in the game, we understood that it's going to be about how people view this thing. It might happen to be on your wall in your living room, but at the time it was just starting on phones and on tablets, and we wanted to make sure that we positioned ourselves to be in that place. So what does that platform have? It's fairly unique in its structure, and it has to be because of the nature of our market and the volume of content that we have. So it actually has all of our broadcast streams, which is the 4 television stations, the free-to-air and the 3 cables. We also have Caribvision on it, which is a Caribbean channel. And then we have our 5 radio stations on there as well. Along with that, we do VOD content. So there's programs and stuff like that. You can go back and watch it later. And it's also the portal that we use for our pay-per-view. We just had a very large event about 3 weeks ago, which is the Boys and Girls Track and Field Championships, the largest of its kind in the world. And that's one that we monetize by selling a direct feed. No ads are in that, and you can get to watch that anywhere in the world by just paying the fee. And then we also have a rental component to it, which is we're saying to independent producers, this is a way that you can come on, and the majority of the revenue share on that favors the independent producer. So, I mean, the business model is aligned around two things. One, we have always wanted to export our brand, right? That has been a big thing. Prior to the technology, it was satellite, thousands of dollars to keep this channel up there, and then just hoping that you probably might get into the tri-state area or into Canada, where you have large numbers of Jamaicans. But because of the new technology and the ability to use broadband, you're actually able to export your own product without needing somebody else to help you do that, right? So we had a lot of deals where we had gotten burnt. You know, somebody comes and says, oh, come give us TVJ and we'll put it out to the tri-state area. And you're like, okay, and how do you get paid? And they said, yes, when you reach the 10,000 subs, you'll start getting paid, and you never get to 10,000 subs. I mean, because you don't know, you have to be going by what you're told. So it gave us a lot more control, which was very important. And also we're actually able to provide an opportunity for smaller channels to come on, and others in the Caribbean that we think might not have been able to invest themselves, but we have a fairly robust platform now that is evolving and it's adjusting, and our partners that we work with are seeing to all of the technical elements that make us available all across the world.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
In Jamaica, the live stream is free. So you don't have to pay to watch TVJ
unless it's a pay-per-view event,
unless it's a pay-per-view.
Okay.
But the actual channels, all the channels. So what does that do for us? That also puts us, it expands our reach, right? So you can say, yeah, we're free to air, but we are also available on all of the devices. And
for advertisers, right? For advertisers, it's an increased audience there.
Exactly.
Okay, and that's domestically. And if you are to access the service internationally, do you actually have to pay?
You have to pay a subscription. Right.
Okay.
And we are just now in the process of launching the other revenue streams, which have to do with pre-roll and post-rolls on the VODs. Mid-rolls as well on the VODs, as well as dynamic ad insertion, which we're particularly excited about. So it will mean that the ad slots that are in all of the live streams, we will replace those ads with ads from the global ad network. And that is exciting to us. We're looking forward to getting that working smoothly and seeing what kind of stream of revenue that will bring.
Okay, thanks. Well, it's very interesting. Very comprehensive as well, because you described it very well, but it's a range of content formats, linear, on demand, a range of feeds from your own feeds, content that come from third parties, a range of monetization models. There
are conversations. Are you trying to do too many things at the same time, and why don't we do the Netflix model or the Hulu model? Or we are always conscious of the reality that our market is different, and our market on two levels. Our market in terms of our audience, but also our market in terms of the content structure. So when you look at the big players on the OTT platform and the thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of hours of content that they have, that sometimes they're buying it, right? So we're not buying content to put on this platform. It's all coming from what we have generated. It's important for us to kind of think through logically what is going to give us volume of things for people to have options, and how interesting that will be for audiences. So, that's part of it. And importantly, it is this real brand extension of reach for all of the properties in the group.
Jewel, it's and Claire was explaining very well. You really need to be ahead of the curve. There's no question about it. Another whole different discussion is what business model works. In terms of that, there's a whole search and discovery process at the moment with all of the over-the-air networks, I would say, around the world. Last year, you mentioned a future plan that you had to expand your multi-screen options by allowing really audiences to access your content via apps, which is one of the ways in which all of the broadcasters are adjusting to this new way of consumption models around the world. What progress were you able to make regarding this project?
It's still very much a work in progress. I'm sure Claire will agree with me when I say that COVID really dealt a serious blow to all the media houses everywhere, especially in small developing societies like our own. So we don't get a subvention from government, even though we are government owned, even though we're state owned enterprise. We don't get a subvention from government. So we're still making our way in the market, and the market contracted significantly by as much as 40, 50%, depending on who you talk to in specific areas. So we really lost a lot of advertising revenue over the last 2 years due to COVID. So we're now finally trying to catch back our feet. Our MCTV platform, we're looking to move that to the next level, change up the platform that it is on, so that we can do a lot of the things that Claire talked about in terms of having VOD content, and we can do some pay-per-view, but we want to do it on a bigger scale. Last year, during COVID, when we had a lockdown and you couldn't go outside, we did something on air called Stand Home Party, which was really a party in the studio with dancers, and we had lights and the lighting and LED screens, and it was A, fully sponsored, and B, we were amazed at how many people, not just locally, but in the diaspora, were looking forward to the Stand Home Party on a Saturday night, to the point where even though we've opened up now and you can still go outside and party, people still want to know if we're having the Stand Home Party. So that has really shown us that there is a real market out there for Barbadian content, for a lot of other stuff that we've done as well. And we really need to get our act together in terms of finding the funding to allow us to explore these platforms and to do more with them. One of our challenges is, and I have to be very careful how I say this, is as a public service broadcaster owned by the government, we don't have the kind of latitude to make a business decision and act upon it. We have to make a recommendation, and it has to go through all the different layers and then wait on approval. So whereas Claire can make a business decision, and as long as her board agrees to it, she's off and running, we're in a holding pattern waiting until our owners determine that we can go ahead. But I think we're finding our feet in that direction. They understand the importance of us being able to take our product to the next level and being able to increase our revenue streams by doing different things. The days when you could make programming and sell it, those days are over. You now have to have alternative revenue streams to support the production of local content. And therefore, it is critical then that we have not only the technology, but the working space to be able to do that. We've been lucky in that Netflix has shot Outer Banks here in Barbados. They've came back and shot another series here recently. But if we could bring our content up to the kind of quality that Netflix would want, then that's another way to be able to put our content out there and fully develop the local video production industry. So it's a longer conversation in which we have to get others to bite into the vision that we have for what we can do. Let me put it that way.
Yep, makes sense. Thanks for that. Claire, I want to move the discussion to another very interesting development recently involving your company. At the beginning of this year, Television Jamaica made history really in the Caribbean by becoming the first station to start transmissions using what's effectively the most advanced digital terrestrial TV standard available today. We're referring to ATSC 3.0, which is also known as a next-gen TV. Why did you decide to go with this standard? And also, what new applications or services will it bring?
Well, I mean, it falls in line with the general attitude of our company in the group. we are moving from analog to digital. So we had not done a digital switch when the United States would have moved and other areas would have moved to ATS 1. We didn't make the move to 1. I think in the region, I think Bahamas did, I think Suriname did, and a couple of other islands. However, we've always been paying attention to what that technology would mean, and what were the best things to come out of it. So when it just came up as a conversation, the country was talking about it, and we're looking at the standard in Europe and looking at the standard in Brazil, and then looking at ATSC 1, we were like, hey, you know, that's not really the best. You know, why don't we go with the European standard? But then going with the European standard has challenges, because we get television sets and spare parts and all of that come from the North America. So
big compatibility problem.
Right, would be, and it would just be more expensive in the long run. Once we heard that ATSC was pushing through and looking at another standard, which was 2, we're like, well, let's wait and see what comes out of that. And then they abandoned 2 and went to 3. You know, from our perspective, the switch was important because analog equipment is basically obsolete. It's difficult to get spare parts and all that kind of thing. So we kind of were anxious for the government to make the announcement, because we had to wait for our regulator and our spectrum authority to determine what the standard was, right? So they actually announced in January 2021 that they want the broadcasters, the free-to-air broadcasters, and there are 3 of us in Jamaica, to make the switch, and that the standard was ATSC 3.0. Well, once we got that go ahead, it was time to roll, because we already had a very clear sense that we were going to do this and how fast we would be able to do it. They indicated that they wanted a signal up by January 2022. And so everything that we're doing during the course of the 2021 year was to get to that deadline and to have a signal up as the government wanted by January 2022. And we were able to do that under interesting circumstances. I mean, we're in the middle of the 4th wave. It was Omicron. There was a team that was supposed to come down from our equipment suppliers to help with the setup. Because of the 4th wave, they couldn't come. So our local engineering team actually had to do that physical setup. Yeah, they were online with them, but it was done by the team locally. And we're really extremely proud of that. Also, one of the things that comes out of adversity, you know, one is that you learn, you know. During all of that year, there were so many things that our team just had to put the work in and understand that technology themselves. And we're extremely proud about that, because it is going to make the rest of the rollout a lot easier than it might have been if we didn't have those that forced us to learn, and then probably would have had us a lot more dependent on foreign contractors that are coming in. So we're very excited about it. We're most excited about what it's going to mean in terms of keeping free-to-air television aligned with a lot of the things that are currently differentiating us from digital operations. So the sweet spot of ATSC 3.0 is that it sits on a internet backbone, and therefore a lot of the variables that people find exciting, you know, knowing how many people have watched something immediately after it has been aired, emergency signals, your ability to geo-target advertising, geo-target content. It is the most exciting thing that we will have done probably since black and white TV became color. You know, it's definitely up there in something that is really historic and something that's going to make a lot of difference to the country. So for example, we will be able to put out more stations. And in being able to put out more stations, you're going to be able to supply content for special needs, special interest groups. It's going to make a lot of difference, I believe, to the development of the country overall. And it probably doesn't come at a more opportune time when indeed free-to-air is under a significant amount of pressure, trying to manage this new wave of everybody talking about digital. I mean, personally, I believe it levels out. Like every other new entrant, it will level out, but this is probably not going to level out as fast. So the idea that a free-to-air broadcaster can expand its real estate to attract more advertising is a big deal. It's a big deal.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. I have a question or two questions really about content acquisition is one of the questions, and the other one is about content distribution. So two questions regarding content. Let's start with the content acquisition question first. How important is it these days when negotiating content purchase contracts to ensure that not only the broadcast, but also the streaming rights are included as part of the deal? Jewel, let's start with you. What do you think?
I want to go back a little bit and then come forward to what Claire was saying, because she's right. It is critical that free-to-air channels be able to move not only their business model, but their viewers to the next level. The days when the Caribbean was in this little idyllic paradise all by itself and people didn't know what was going on in the rest of the developed world, those days are over. So people are requiring of free-to-air television the same things they can do with digital platforms. Not only that, I found that during this period of the pandemic, people watched a lot of local TV simply because it gave them opportunities to get information in a world full of misinformation and disinformation. They knew that if you watch the local television channel at a particular time when the government was doing a press conference to update them on COVID or whatever else was going on, that's where you got the correct information from, not some random voice note circulating on WhatsApp. I guess because everybody was home and focused, you weren't going to work, the kids were home at school, doing online school, etc. You had more time to watch more local TV. So it was the place where you could see you. And therefore I found that our audience for Channel 8 has increased significantly, whereas before we were losing viewers, we have gained significantly simply because the content has changed and your ability to get different perspectives and views was coming on local TV. For me, it is the content production and the use of local producers that has really saved us, because we have so many local producers who are doing different things. They're doing talk shows, game shows, they're talking about different elements of their life and what's going on with them. They're doing shows on culture, they're going out and shooting art exhibitions and stuff. And so it gives you a different perspective. And therefore, we found that working with these independent producers has really been a boon for us in terms of our ability to deliver a diverse amount of content that speaks to different audiences. And because those young producers too are on social media, so they tell their friends, they go on Facebook, they go on IG, etc., and they tell their friends, I'm going to be on Channel 8 at this time, watch my show. So more of those young people are coming to free-to-air TV and watching because of that. You asked about the importance of negotiating streaming. That's getting harder and harder to do, because with some international content, you may get the free-to-air rights, but the streaming rights have already gone to somebody else. So sometimes you may be able to negotiate the two, but the price point is different for both, and they may be looking to live stream, offer their streaming rights to somebody else. We recently did BSAT, which is the Barbados Secondary Schools Athletics Championships here. And we got the rights as the television station, but somebody else got the live streaming rights. So I don't know if Claire's experience has been different, but I find that especially with international events like Olympics and stuff, you may get the rights for free-to-air TV, but streaming and cable rights and stuff are all divvied up and going to different people, and never the twain shall meet. They can't cross. Claire?
Well, our approach to it has to do with what's the business model. and does this make sense? I'm not going to take a high-priced free-to-air right only if you're also selling in the market exclusivity on streaming and exclusivity on cable, and then I can't go to the advertiser and have a conversation.
Yes, I agree.
No, so we leverage that all the time, and we will walk away from deals that we know are not healthy to us. So it is not healthy to have a deal where you get free-to-air rights, there is somebody else with the other rights in the market. It is muddying the waters. You can't have a proper conversation with your advertisers. They're not comfortable or sure that they're really getting their message delivered because they don't know who's watching it on the different spaces. So here it goes back again to our vision. We have a cable platform, so we can buy the cable rights because we have a station that's on cable. We have a streaming platform, so we can, in other words, we have everything. So when we go to that table, we want everything. And it's not a matter of, well, you can't stream, so you can't ask for the streaming right. I mean, when we go to the table, we're asking for radio rights, we're asking for streaming rights, we're asking for cable rights, we're asking for outdoor rights, depending on what it is. So yes, the market is getting a little bit, uncomfortable, but we have to make the decisions that make business sense for us. The other thing that becomes important in our mind is we are number one in the market now, so we do have leverage in that regard. And it's important to utilize that leverage to benefit the company clearly. Sometimes depending on what it is, if it's something of great national importance that we have not paid a lot of money for, but the idea is everybody wants to watch it. Yeah, I mean, everybody, I guess, can watch it and it's everywhere because it probably doesn't have a high commercial value. But if it's something that has high commercial value, we do stand our ground on it. Depending on the type of event, there are some times when we will share cable rights or we might share streaming rights. There was a time in the region actually when sharing free-to-air rights was not a big deal either. And it probably isn't for extremely high ticket products for more than one free-to-air person to have it, if the market is valued at a level that it's difficult for one free-to-air station to cover those rights, right? So we're not against sharing rights in and of themselves once the price point makes sense. So what you find that a lot of the rights owners are trying to have their cake and eat it too, more or less. So they want to split the rights up in a way that they end up getting probably 3 or 4 times what they would if they sold it to one person. At the end of the day for us is there are things that you acquire that are nice to have, and there are things that you acquire that are good to have. If it's only nice to have and I'm going to end up with a hole in the bucket, then I'm not going to take it. If it's good to have, which means that I have it, everybody's satisfied, they like it, and at the end of the day, I can pay the bills and there's a little bit outside left, to pay for another event, then fine. But we can't be held hostage to events because you make bad decisions and it's bad for you. So. Absolutely.
But let me go on and say a little bit from what Claire said. She and I are in slightly different positions simply because Jamaica is far bigger than Barbados. Your population is what, Claire? Just over 2 million?
3, approaching 3. 3 million.
3. Barbados is 285,000. So she has the kind of leverage. Yeah, she has the kind of leverage and that we don't have. We can bring some of that to bear, but at the end of the day, we're a very small market. So sometimes you just have to play the hand you're dealt.
No, absolutely. Scale is everything, right? In these sort of negotiations. Yep, no doubt. And the other question connected with content was the other way around, right? What sort of opportunities in terms of selling your content are you seeing? Have you, and I think, Jules, you briefly touch on that issue. Have you considered the possibility of licensing some of the valuable local content that you produce to the large international OTT platforms? Thinking of the biggest ones here, Netflix or Amazon or others. Do you think this could become a monetization alternative to advertising? What do you think, Jules?
I think so. I think though that the quality of our content, and I don't just mean this, the plot line and stuff, I mean some of the aesthetics of our content would have to be improved for us to even approach Netflix. But that's a conversation we're having internally, and we also need to be having a similar conversation with Netflix in terms of getting from
I think, Jules, we're having some
them,
connection.
at least no point offering them stuff that they're going to reject. So it's ongoing conversation. Let's put it that way. It's an ongoing conversation.
Okay. And Claire, what's your view on this?
It's an interesting thing because I used to go to NAPTE in Miami.
Miami, yep.
Right. And we stopped sending a team there. Don't go there anymore. Primarily because you go there and everybody wants to sell you stuff, but nobody wants to buy stuff from you.
Just to buy anything from you.
So I would say generally there is not a quid pro quo mindset from the people outside of the region to our content. That's a fact. Is there a production quality issue? Yeah, there is. I'm not going to doubt that is so, but certainly I think it's not as bad as it was once. And we do a small amount of export. So we actually have a television station called Television Jamaica International, and that's a full channel that we export. It's currently in the Cayman Islands, and we're trying to expand that. And what we do is we sell that signal for a monthly fee. We then also have a small amount of, like half an hour shows that we sell to an outfit in New York, and have done a couple of those deals with short term in the UK. Generally, that is our export of content is one of our strategic goals. We, in the last 2 years, have done some very deliberate investment in production equipment that aligns us with what is required for export quality. And we are very focused on doing some things that are not the normal run-of-the-mill stuff. So as far as local content is concerned, you throw up a talk show, it's two people talking to each other, you do up a current affairs thing, there's a lot of that. So there was a lot of that was going on. Our news product is very strong. We have a morning show that is very strong. Where you didn't have a lot of stuff going on is going to be in your dramas and your sitcoms and children's content. So we're focused on spending some time to develop that kind of content and with a direct plan to export, but we are actually not necessarily looking to North America or even to the Netflixes in the short term. There are other markets. We think the African market is an interesting market. It's a large number of people who are more culturally aligned with the content that we might produce, right? So you don't have to go too far off script for them to relate to us. So for example, we, in preparation for that movement last year, we actually did a drama series during COVID, and we had an African actor in there, an African actor that's in shows on Netflix. So we're trying to create that bridge between the content and the markets. And hopefully at some point, sooner rather than later, we will get that transition and sale of product going on.
Yeah, it's probably only a question of time. Interesting. We are literally 1 minute away from our ending time. But I'd like to end quickly, please, with each of you. And Jules, you made that very clear. 2020 and 2021 have been financially extremely difficult years for TV stations across the Caribbean, which were particularly affected by advertising declines as a direct consequence of the pandemic. I'm wondering what expectations you have for this year, especially now as we see tourism gradually beginning to recover. Are you hoping, do you have some signs of recovery in terms of the advertising for the rest of this year? Very quickly, 30 seconds each if you can. Jewel first.
Yes, I do. We are starting to see more businesses come on board in terms of sponsorship of programs and bringing in infomercials and stuff to us. So yeah, the international agencies are predicting double-digit growth between now and the end of what is our national financial year next March 31st, 2023. So I am hopeful if we can just get past the peaks and troughs of COVID. Yeah. And the constant waves of it. Yes, I am hopeful.
Okay, well, double-digit growth sounds hopeful. Claire?
Well, to be honest, we did not have a negative COVID experience on tonight at all. We did very, very well, posting highest revenues in the history of the company, as well as profits, which is probably more important than the revenue. So I would say we didn't have that kind of negative experience because of a number of novel things that were done. Probably the bigger challenge I have is maintaining what we did during COVID so that they don't think that, well, no, everything that has come out, why are you not doing well? I would say that we are in really interesting times, and managing the growth of the brand in terms of the revenues is something that you really have to keep a very eagle eye on all components of the market, because there's so many things that are happening. But I'm optimistic.
Okay. Well, a very optimistic end then to the conversation. I want to really, Claire and June, thank you. You are wonderful speakers. You've shared your expertise in these two very interesting Caribbean markets. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to listen to you. Again, we wish Odette, who unfortunately wasn't able to join us today, that she gets very well soon. And this brings to an end our latest edition of Nextv Series Caribbean. So thank you to our audience for staying with us throughout the day, and we hope to see you very soon in another edition. Thank you.
Thank you.